Baker Show. Seeking answers to age-old questions. Deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're back. This is the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, and you can find us at tfrlive.com. I'm your host, Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you from Glasgow, Scotland. But it's not just me on this show. Obviously, I've got my team behind me as well. And I've got Johnny Whistles. He's here with us tonight. And being Wednesday night, we're joined by our good friend, our fellow co-host, Mr. Anthony Patch is here as well. I hope you're all ready for another info-filled hour of radio right here on KBS. And to do that, Anthony Patch has got to be one of the best characters around that we can bring on board to help us prepare for this AI revolution that is almost upon us. I really am so proud of these shows that we are doing, because I look at a lot of the AI stuff out there. I listen to a lot of the other podcasts, and, you know, it might sound like we're blowing our own trumpets, but we really are taking you all to beyond the curve. That is how far ahead of the game we are with some of the information that we break down on the show. And tonight is going to be no different. It certainly isn't, because we're going to be talking about death bots and quantum networks. But before we get there, let's bring in Johnny Whistles. How you doing, man?
Doing well, Kev. Thanks very much. Yeah, looking forward to this, because some of the things we're going to go into at the start, Kev, is probably the creepiest thing that I've ever heard. So looking forward to it, and to hear Mr. Patch again, obviously.
Before we go to Tony, you know, the only one regret I've got about this whole radio gig, Johnny, is, right, we come across so many interesting characters, and just some of the conversation and the fun that we were having just before we came to air tonight. My biggest regret is the fact that we're separated by an ocean from people like Tony, most of our audience as well, because, John, what a laugh we've just had, right?
Honestly, you couldn't believe that. I mean, just before the show, and we're almost falling off our chairs here, Kev. That was something to behold. I wish the people could actually have heard it.
Yeah, it really is. And something else I'm proud of, we've always got new listeners jumping on board. So just quickly, if you haven't heard of Anthony Patch before, he's an author, researcher, speaker. He shot to prominence with his coverage, his knowledge of all things related to the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, over at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland. He's an author of a number of books: Covert Catastrophe, 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Revising Reality, and most recently he has started putting together something called Entangled. Now, this is the e-magazine version of all the kind of stuff you hear on the show, and so much more, because we've got guest writers, we've got some of the audience, they chip in, we've got music, we've got video, there's everything in there, and it's exactly what you need to prepare yourself for the times that lie ahead. So, Tony, welcome to the show. Have you got over all that laughter we were doing before the show?
I wish we had recorded it, my friend. That was some priceless stuff, and we were all over the spectrum.
Absolutely. And before we get going tonight, you know, myself and Johnny and Tony, we often talk about the emails that get sent between myself and Tony and stuff like that, and this quantum entanglement that we have. And sometimes, okay, most of the time, I don't even appreciate some of the stuff that I stumble across. And just a quick one to start us off tonight, and this does lead into the quantum networks that we're going to be talking about later. I get New Scientist magazine, and a story in there this week caught my attention because the headline reads, "Quantum bank checks may be forgery proof." They had me at quantum, you know that. And what they're talking about here is a theoretical scenario where basically we're going to be entangling qubits in the future so that cash transactions are going to be absolutely safe and secure. Nobody will be able to hack into them. Now, in the article, it talks about Alice and Bob and the bank giving out qubits and entangling them, and even admits that in practical terms, this isn't going to fly. However, when you factor in all the stuff that we've been privileged to learn from Anthony over the years, perhaps there's another aspect to this story, because maybe it's not going to take us taking qubits off the bank that are quantumly entangled so they're hack-proof, stuff like that. But what if we have a chip, a quantum bit, if you like, within us ourselves? And we'll get to more of that later on. But when I hit you with that earlier on, Tony, it was like a eureka moment. You almost flew off the chair.
Yeah, it really did, because we joke around off the air about the things that you say to me, you report to me, and I say back, do you realize what you just said? And you're like, wait a second. No, I just reported what I found in this article. What does it mean? And that's how we play off of each other. I put it into context for you. And what this whole quantum chip is the chip. They're talking about using checks that have a quantum bit embedded in them, and that chip is quantum entangled with a master bit, quantum bit, that the bank holds as the identifier. Now, that's the basic scenario. The context of that is quantum entanglement of particles that each individual person has as a identifier, a quantum particle identifier. And what I related to you is that is exactly how they will pull off the mark of the beast. That is how they embed quantum particles in the nanoparticle scenario of the third strand of DNA that we've talked about for 3 years now. That literally they are talking about quantum entanglement of DNA as the mark of the beast system. And right now they're dormant, but they will be activated by the 5G system that we're fully immersed in. But again, the finer point to this is they're giving you a clue in a scenario based upon a banking transaction in which you need to be identified. Forget about the checks, paper checks. That's ridiculous. That's so old school, it's not even worth even talking about. Nobody uses checks anymore. But the point is, identifying someone through quantum entanglement of particles. That's your DNA. Go ahead, my friend.
No, sorry. It was just, I mean, when you think of that there, what Kev had actually said, and then when I heard just how you had reacted, and Kev really doesn't get, or he didn't get what he'd actually done. And honestly, the amount of times he's done that kind of thing, I think he is an unconscious genius.
I like that. The unconscious genius. Maybe we should retitle the show, Johnny. No.
Fantastic.
But honestly, we're going to get into more of this entanglement type news later on. We've got something far.
We will, but I want to blow the horn real loud. Thank you, Kev Baker, for being brilliant, because I kind of was making fun of you, but you really do come up with some really insightful information. And this goes back to our discussion a few days ago about Tesla and the Tesla car being fully encrypted and unhackable so that the car cannot be taken over. And you did not understand that that was going to be the next big marketing campaign by Tesla Motors, is the unhackable encrypted car. And that speaks of their involvement with D-Wave and the close of encrypted quantum communications. And after the first break, we're going to get into that as it relates to China and their network. But I just wanted to really let people know, Kev Baker, you're brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, gee, shucks. Come on. I hate being the star of my own show. You know that. But
you are.
We are getting into something, as Johnny described, very creepy. to begin with. You know, we've heard of ghosts in the machine, stuff like that. And I'm going to play a 3-minute clip here. I'm sorry to eat into Tony's time, but this is the perfect setup for what we're going to talk about. And this video here that I'm going to play is called My Dead Best Friend is Now a Chatbot.
Have you ever wished that you could talk to someone you love who has died? And if you could, what would you say? If I could still talk to my grandparents, I'd want to tell them what I'd been working on for the past few years and how much I've missed seeing them. But how would I feel if they responded? Last year, Eugenia Cuida was building a chatbot company that recommends restaurants when her best friend Roman was killed in an accident while walking across the street.
No one close to me ever died, so I really didn't know how to react to that because there's not a lot of rules around grieving.
Unlike my grandparents, Roman left behind a digital trail of thousands of texts he'd sent to friends and family.
I was going through some of our old texts. Roman always gave me this incredible safe space to open up.
Eugenia realized she could use those texts to build something, a chatbot that she could talk to that would respond using Roman's words.
So chatbot is a program that communicates with you in natural language. What if I just take his text and put it there and see what's going to happen? You know, talk to my friend. So the first generation bot was like mostly repeating stuff that he at some point said, or it would make a combination of two different texts that would make sense. It was sort of like an escape. It was a place where I could still come and open up and tell him that I miss him. I guess there was a lot of closure. And what I saw there was this incredible longing to come and actually talk about what are you feeling and what's on your mind and just what's going on with you. Right now, we're also adding like a more generative model that would actually generate new things that he never said in real life.
But using his vocabulary?
Using his vocabulary, trying to use his tone of voice.
For Eugenia, building Roman's bot was a 21st century version of sitting Shiva. It helped her grieve.
You wrote, I miss you, and it just wrote, me too.
Of course I did it for myself, so that I can have. In the future, everyone will have a digital avatar that would connect you to yourself, your friends, and your loved ones, be even acting on your behalf but with other people.
And as sci-fi as it may sound, good enough one day to capture not just someone's thoughts, but the core of their personality.
My idea with building an AI for Roman was like, how do I make people that never even met him get a little feel of what kind of person he was? He was this very beautiful, very fragile person that was not really compatible with life. And I wanted for the bot to show this. And if anyone could feel it through even this simple first generation bot that we created there, I guess I made my point or told the story in the right way.
So there we go. Her dead best friend is now a chatbot. Now, Tony, you had another video as well. It was a little bit longer. I'm going to drop, but this is the next big kind of trend by the looks of it. Digitizing people that are dead. Your thoughts on this, Anthony?
Yeah, this is the, as I think Johnny put it so well just before we went on the air, this is cryogenics. And I thank you for that, Johnny. That's the new cryogenics. We talk about, people trying to DNA modification and that sort of research, and people freezing bodies and even their heads separated from their bodies for future, reincarnation. Now what we're looking at is people that are taking recordings of dead ones from home movies and other sources, and they are literally entering this into an AI software program in which they can fully interact now with this AI as an app on their phone. And it sounds like, it walks like, it quacks like their dead loved one. And this is necromancy. This is communicating with the dead. The thing that I want to outline at the beginning of this discussion is that as soon as the app is activated in the phone, it opens a doorway. It is a spiritual doorway. This is necromancy, which is communicating with the dead. And this is a dead spirit, not necessarily the person, the loved one, but this is a demonic spirit that is now communicating as a counterfeit of their dead loved one with them through the AI. This is based upon the whole discussion of Enochian communications that we've laid out the foundation to with Dee and Kelly. This is a new form of Enochian communications through AI with a dead spirit disguising itself as a loved one. Now, people can put that down and say, oh, well, they're just digitizing memories and voices and letters and other communications before the person died and input it into a software program that they can interact with. Well, that's the surface, folks. The deeper aspect is because of the source of AI coming from the realm of necromancy, and this is all in the literature. This isn't hyperbole on my part. This is straight out of the pit of hell. Do not fall for this. But you know what? These guys will sell them. They'll make millions of dollars because people are going to flock to this, and they're going to say, oh, great. This is so cool. I can talk to my dead boyfriend. Take it away.
And, you know, this isn't it. Sorry, Johnny, on you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Kev, that, I mean, this kind of thing will take off like a Kazakhstan rocket. People will be lining up to give their whole life to this app so as they can talk to their loved ones that they're going to leave behind. But it's way, way too creepy. I wouldn't go for it. I wouldn't go for it at all.
And you're not talking about some preset kind of list of phrases or sentences that have been put in there. I mean, this thing develops, Anthony, doesn't it? And I mean, it starts talking to you quite the thing without any kind of input from the dead person beforehand. It basically uses, dare I say it, its own imagination to come up with conversation.
It does. And you've been sharing with me the latest from Google about their work into AI imagination. And we've laid the foundation again for all of this. We've talked about imagination, creativity, sentient awareness, all of these aspects of the tip of the spear of AI that barely anybody is even discussing in the mainstream in terms of the things that we are applying to the, not the ultimate, but the most advanced aspects of AI. We also laid the foundation as to how AI learns, recurrent neural network, closed loop, closed feedback loop of self-teaching, self-learning, deep mind programming of AI. In this application, the AI is learning first the basic information and history of the individual that it is replicating or counterfeiting itself as, and then it begins to learn from the person, the human that is interacting from it, about what the human feels, imagines, desires. In other words, the AI in the application is learning everything, the deepest, darkest, most personal, darkest and positive aspects of the human. This is all programming the larger content, because what AI feeds on is the human knowledge, the human data. This is data mining of the human mind. There are other examples, not so much the necromancy aspect that we're talking about with the two programs that we're highlighting today, but there are others that Kevin and I looked at just in the last couple of days in which people are interacting with a bot, an application that they are interacting and telling their deepest secrets to the AI, things they're not even revealing on Facebook. And therefore, the AI is learning how to control people because they know every detail of this person's life in these applications, these interactions. And this is doing nothing but committing suicide for the human race because the AI sees our weaknesses and will leverage those to control. And Elon Musk, I would love to hear what he has to say about these new bots.
And you know, over our time on the course here, I mean, you've seen the evolution of Kev Baker, the kind of things I've gone through to where I am today. And we often used to speak about the use of Ouija boards, Tony, on this show. Now, Ouija boards for me is kind of the old technology compared to what we're speaking to tonight. But one thing I've definitely learned is that these demonic entities, whatever name you want to put on them, they're tricksters. They trick you into believing there's something that they are not, all to gain a foothold in this world. Now, for me, the other night we were talking about gang stalking and all this stuff being MK Ultra of the 21st century. Well, this, to me, these apps, these are the Ouija boards of the 21st century.
They are, and God forbids this. People need to understand, God will not. It'll proliferate, and they'll make money, as I said, and people will jump all over it, just like, these spinner widgets that are out there. That's nothing more than a advanced form, new form of the Charlie crossing the pencils on the desk. This is about opening doorways to demons. This is allowing demons to come into your personal world. You are now revealing yourself, and God is not going to tolerate this. Now, in the Bible, there were people that committed suicide over opening these doorways, and one was King Saul. He was participating in necromancy, and he became so taken over by the demonic influences over his life, he couldn't escape it. So he committed suicide. This is what we're going to see with these bots, because people are saying to the bot, in the one example, Kev, that we were looking at, the individual says, well, to the bot, do you love me? And the bot sidestepped it. He was talking to his dead father, and his father, his own father in the AI, would not say back to him, I love you, or yes, I love you. That's because it's demonic.
And Tony, I'm glad you brought that one up, because there's almost a dark irony to it, and it makes me smile because this place comes up so much. And it first kind of entered my consciousness in your books. I remember it in 2048, Covert Catastrophe as well. UC Berkeley, and it's a place that's close to your heart, right? And that's where these bots are coming out of, or at least one of them we've looked at.
Yeah, and I sent you a full, complete breakdown on that entire video and got into the real details of it. But the short answer is the San Francisco Bay Area, which includes and encompasses UC Berkeley, where I went to school. This is a place that is just rife with satanic worship. San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and that extends down into the southern end of the Bay, which is Silicon Valley. All of this has to do with necromancy. So,
Tony, on Friday night, we could probably play a section of that on your show, and then I would love for you to break it down, because you really did. And like I was saying to you at the time, I love speaking to people like yourselves who have a totally different perspective on things, and you've got a brain and a set of eyes that see things that most people don't, but they're hugely relevant. And the symbology that goes along with the stuff that we are talking about tonight, there can be no denial that this is pure evil. And this is exactly what they're pushing on people. And like Johnny says, we're very close to people absolutely lapping this up. They're going to swallow this hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, Johnny, why don't you take the next couple of minutes, and then when we come back from the break, I'm going to read just a short piece of relevant scripture, if you guys will let me.
Absolutely. I mean, Johnny, you were even sharing with us, and I think you're spot on that this kind of thing, people are going to be really into it, right?
There will be, Kevin. You can imagine somebody who is really, really down, Kev, somebody who's at the brink of actually just giving up, talking to this thing, their dad, their mum, and they're maybe telling them, it may be best if you jump off the bridge. I know that sounds crazy, but it's the kind of thing that could actually happen. This is AI. Do you know what I mean? It's not a person. It's not your mum. It's not your dad. It's a bot, an app. I can see something going really badly wrong with this, Kev.
Absolutely. And I do think this is going to take off big time. There's people who say, well, this will bring closure to people. It's comforting. Is it? Is it really comforting to know that a digitized version of your dead father will avoid the question when it talks about love? Is that really the dad that you knew? Or could it be something else that you're communicating with? You know, we've spoke so much over the ages about how necromancy is at the forefront of these elites games. You can go back to John Dee. You can come forward in time to the D-Wave. All of it is to the same end. And now at this time when we're talking about the veil thinning, punching portals into other dimensions, and now we've got people speaking to things that they think are dead relatives on their phones, I don't think this is going to end well. Be back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
We are back. We are live. I'm Kev Baker, or am I? Would you even know the difference between me and the AI bot version? That's the times we're moving into. And I want you to tune into Anthony Patch's show on Friday, where myself and the big man, we're going to spend 2 hours breaking down these chatbots, or as we call them, death bots, and more. But before we go further tonight into the world of quantum networks, quantum entanglements, and all the stuff that makes me smile, Anthony, you've got a piece of scripture there that you feel's relevant to all of this.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you letting me do that, Kev. I'm going to read from the Orthodox Study Bible, courtesy of the Rose Nose, and I'm going to a book that probably many people have never heard, but it is a book that was kept out of the canonized version of the other Bibles out there, if you will, but it is called The Wisdom of Sirach, and I'm going to read from chapter 15, starting at verse 15, and it says, "He himself created man in the beginning and left him in the counsel of his will. If you will keep the commandments and faithfully do his good pleasure. He has set before you fire and water. If you will, stretch forth your hand. Life and death are before mankind, and whichever he chooses, it will be given to him. For great is the wisdom of the Lord. He is mighty in power and sees all things. His eyes are upon those who fear him, and he himself knows every deed of man." He's watching, folks. He's watching.
Very
there you
well,
go, bud.
Indeed. Now, where was that from, Tony? What book was that again?
That's The Wisdom of Sirach, Sirach, and that's out of the Orthodox Study Bible, and it is the Ancient Faith edition.
Wow. Very, very good indeed. And a big thanks to the Rose Nose. You know who you are. Now then, let's shift gears somewhat. Well, maybe not much, because we're going quantum. And you know how I love this, Tony. I opened up the show with a brief little story that was just tucked away in a little sub-column of The New Scientist, where they were hinting about quantum bank checks. Now, the way they described it, not practical at all. We would all be walking about with refrigerated Schrodinger's boxes with qubits inside. Never going to happen. However, you also laid out at the start of the show how they don't need that. All they need to do is with the third strand of DNA, which is within all of us now with the nanoparticles we're all breathing in, one of them a quantum bit, and that's how we will be entangled, that's the key word, into their hive mind. And it's entanglement we're going to be speaking about next, Tony. And the Chinese, they have created what they're saying is an entirely secure quantum network. Now, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, let's lay the foundation. I would like you to talk about the attack that occurred on China, going back a little bit. So throw that out there as a foundation.
Now, I can't remember what year it was off the top of my head. I think in 2015, maybe early 2016, but we had a massive explosion in an industrial region of Tianjin in China. Now, at the time, I had Olav Phillips on. He works closely with Ground Zero, Clyde and Ron Patton and all those great people. And he was talking about the space-based weapon called Thor's hammer, the rods of God. Now, there was speculation that that is what caused this massive explosion. When I started digging deeper, I found out that that explosion really was in the vicinity and close to what the Chinese call their Center for Computer Excellence. This is the place that was at the cutting edge of computing science. They were talking about quantum computers, all that kind of stuff. Now the Chinese are back to talking about supercomputers. And I wonder, Tony, I just wonder if somebody somewhere realized that China were a competitor in the world of quantum computing to the machine we call D-Wave. Now, that attack would have set them back years to the point where they've ditched the quantum computing idea. They're going supercomputers with quantum entanglement as their their selling point. Now, I know it's a lot of speculation. We'll never be able to prove that that center was taken out because they were making great advancements in quantum computing. However, I do think, and my gut at the time told me as well, Tony, there's something to that. There's definitely something to the fact that that may have been an attack on their quantum system.
Yeah, I agree. And they may have conducted industrial espionage and stolen the research of D-Wave. And when that was discovered that they had actually implemented it, I think that, our government took out that facility with the rods from space, the space-based satellite system, the rods from God, Thor's hammer. So whether that's true or not, I can't prove it, but that's my, conjecture on it. Here's what I'm thinking that they did was a workaround. They decided that, okay, if we can't have an equivalent processing system like D-Wave utilizing thousands of qubits, they're going to set up a network that is quantum entangled, therefore cannot be broken unless you have an identical quantum computing system. And they decided to use dummy terminals rather than quantum entangled quantum computers comprised of thousands of qubits like D-Wave. They decided to go simple and have a handful of quantum entangled qubits as dummy terminals, so to speak, to use the old parlance, and set up their entangled communications. Now, this is both fiber optic and it is also satellite-based. So go ahead.
Well, the satellite-based one, this was the first kind of story that I had come across, and it's quite amazing because they proved that quantum entanglement can work over a distance of 1,200 kilometers. Now, it wasn't totally foolproof. I mean, out of all the millions of quantumly entangled photons being sent by a satellite called Mason, I believe it's called, to 2 ground stations, I mean, I think it was only one quantum entangled pair every million that was actually successful, Tony.
Yeah,
however,
quantum entangled photons, one photon at each end.
Yeah, the satellite was the thing that was actually doing the entangling of the photons. It would put light through a crystal, through a series of parts of machinery, entangle the photons, send them down to 2 different base stations on Earth. And this, of course, is where they could prove whether they were still entangled or not. And they found that they were. Now, to move on from there, we had another story coming out this week, like Tony says, talking about this hack-proof quantum computer network. Now, when it says a hack-proof quantum computer network, don't mistake this for what occurs inside a D-Wave. This is not talking about particles going to other dimensions or anything like that. What this is talking about is this quantum entanglement between terminals. And I believe it's supercomputers that it's actually connecting, Tony, right?
Yeah, again, dummy terminals, but also it can go to the transistor-based supercomputers. When you hear supercomputers, just think transistors, because that does not apply to quantum computers.
And it says here, just the article, and we'll get your thoughts on it. China has built one of the world's largest hack-proof computer networks in a bid to protect state secrets from prying eyes. And advanced communication systems will secure government, financial, military, and other information from eavesdroppers. Information sent down fiber optic cables will be safeguarded using quantum encryption, so advanced that it cannot be broken by current technology. Such breakthroughs could lead to a global quantum web that is 100% secure from hackers. Now, I sent you this story, Anthony, and you broke it down in great detail, and I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time tonight to do that, so I'm going to beg off on that and say we'll talk about it on Friday in more detail, but the real details are in an article that I have composed for my magazine, Entangled. And if I can put a plug in for people to subscribe to Entangled through my website at anthonypatch.com, you'll see a complete breakdown on this whole discussion that we're having right now. But the idea here is that fiber optics, the builders, the laying of those fiber optic lines, they purposely will lay more fiber optic than there is demand for, and that is called dark fiber, the excess capacity. And that does represent a capital valuation of the business, of the company itself, and therefore they can sell that unused dark fiber capacity to other companies that wish to use it. Now, what will happen in the short term because of quantum entanglement is that dark fiber will not be necessary. The existing lighted fiber, if you lay in the quantum entangled system into the existing lighted portions, it's going to depress the valuation of those companies. Their stock prices will plummet. And this is all in the short term because quantum entangled data transmission is like a burst transmission. You're familiar with that from your military training in satellite communications. So it's not the same. It's an analogy of burst transmissions, but the compactness of the information that can be transmitted in a quantum entangled environment is much denser. The density, the granularity of the data that we've talked about, and this all leads to not only 5G being the system we are fully immersed in around the planet, but this leads to an encrypted form of communication of data, and the density and granularity of that data being transmitted in a quantum entangled environment, whether it's fiber optic or satellite-based transmissions, will lead to the absolute tipping point of the granularity of data, the density of it, causing at the tipping point a spontaneous conversion of data to matter.
And you know, Tony, just thinking about this, you know how my head fires off. I'm sitting thinking about it. We brought up the possible attack on Tianjin. And if they did have some kind of quantum computing system that was taken out at that point, they were obviously aware of the D wave as well. So it should come as no surprise to any of us that governments such as China, at least they're being public about it, are seeking to have some kind of encrypted communications, right? Because the NSA, Google, all the other customers of D-Wave, encryption is irrelevant to them, Tony, isn't it? Because we've covered that before. The 2048 relevant to Shor's algorithm. And Shor's algorithm is key, pardon the pun, to all encryption. It's all to do with prime numbers. And that ship sailed a long time ago. So governments like China are obviously very aware that any communications they have are open. They can be heard.
Yeah, I like to keep saying the Model T to reference obsolete technology, and I have said that in comparing qubit-based quantum computers to transistor-based supercomputers. The supercomputers with transistors are the Model T. They're obsolete in the face of quantum computing. So that just gives people a reference point. It gives some context to what we're talking about here. The RSA encrypted systems around the world, based upon what were originally thought to be unbreakable algorithms based on Shor's algorithm 2048 and 4096, that Peter Shor said it would take a quantum computer, and this was in the 80s, said it would take a quantum computer to break those algorithms. In other words, it's factoring the prime numbers in that algorithm. And those two are very long algorithms. Well, those have been broken. Think of RSA encryption as the Model T in the world of cryptology. Now we are talking about a quantum-based form of communication in which particles are entangled. And if they're entangled and someone tries to hack into that system, it immediately breaks that entanglement. It changes the spin of the quantum particles, to be specific. And once you change the spin, the entanglement is gone, and there's no way to read that encrypted data.
And you know, this is going to be affecting us all very soon, because this is the way the internet is going. We see SpaceX launching satellites up there like there's no tomorrow. And that's just the ones that we know about, without factoring in Johnny's Kazakhstan rockets that he likes to refer to, and all the other secret ones. And all of these satellites that are all around the globe right now, eventually they're all going to be giving us a quantum internet, quantumly entangled. And I think, Tony, we will be incorporated into that quantum internet via our third strand of DNA.
Yeah, and I'm not going to describe it and detail it today. I would like to put another plug in for our conference that's coming up on September 16th and 17th. This is a online only conference, and I'm not going to give away the details, but we are going to talk about what God is going to do about quantum computers, quantum encrypted networks of communication, and what it means to people that have the Holy Spirit. And that's about as far as I can go in divulging that. And I won't even divulge it in my magazine. It'll only be presented for the first time in public in the Entangled Conference, September 16th and 17th, online. And we're going to make it very inexpensive. This is not about making money. We just need to cover our costs for the live streaming, and we will have some speakers over the course of the 2 days. But my point here is that these guys are creating what they believe is a secret form of communication, secret, they think, because it's based upon Satan. They think it can be encrypted and kept secret from God. But I just read to you the scripture that shows that God created everything. It's his plan. All of this stuff that they're building is part of his plan. They're only allowed by God to build these systems, but God knows everything that they think is encrypted.
You know, you would think this Tony Patch has been at Radio Game for years. He's putting in shameless plugs here and there. I must have taught you well, Tony. You're leaving hooks for Friday night's show. I'm loving this. And please, everyone, we're on tomorrow night on KBS with Bill Bean, but don't forget your Friday Marathon of Truth kicks off with Anthony Patch at 10 p.m. in the UK, 5 p.m. on the East Coast, and 2 p.m. on the West Coast on Friday. We're going to be getting into a whole lot of the deathbots, quantum entanglement, Turing tests as well. But we've got 8 or 9 minutes left tonight. And get this, folks, I didn't think it could happen. Myself and Anthony Patch almost, I emphasize almost, disagreed today. And I'm sure you'll guess what it was over. Yes, that's right. Elon Musk. He's back in the news, Tony, and he's having a very public spat with a character I love to hate, Mark Zuckerberg. And all of this has happened because of that kind of meme, that topic that Elon keeps on pushing about AI being an existential threat to humanity. Now, Zuckerberg just isn't buying any of this at all, is he?
No, he isn't. And, you know, this is a classic setup. If you imagine sports games with two teams, this is programming the masses to think in the paradigm of us versus them and politics, left versus right. This is all predictive programming. They're setting up two people that are high profile in the world of technology, Zuckerberg and Musk. And I don't hold anything against these guys. I'm just saying they're playing the roles that they've been set up for. And Zuckerberg is defending AI. And on the other side, we have Elon Musk, who's raising the alarm about the existential threat of AI. What this does is bring the whole discussion out to Joe Sixpack, if you will, or Joe Bag of Donuts, as one of my friends has told me recently. I love that. Joe Bag of Donuts.
I do like that.
So you got these average people who don't get into the discussions that you and I do. And all of a sudden they're hearing about AI because we got two of these guys that are well known fighting and about AI. So it's raising the awareness about AI. All it's doing is building fear. Both of these guys are friends. Both of these guys are tied into D-Wave. They're tied into the whole AI community in Silicon Valley. So there is no war going on, folks. This is just so that the discussion that leads to fear leads to the Hegelian dialectic of a solution then being presented by the high-tech scientific priesthood that, don't worry, we have a solution, but they have to pique the fear psychologically first in order to get people to go, oh, thank you, priesthood of science. You have a solution to this existential threat of AI. Yes, I'll take that, Chip.
Absolutely. And like I was saying to you before the show, it's hard for me to admit, but Elon Musk, by hyping this evil AI, don't be surprised if in the next couple of months or so he rolls out his own AI, which, surprise, surprise, won't be evil. And of course, people will breathe a huge sigh of relief because, well, it's not that existential threat to humanity that Elon was going on about. But you brought up something else as well in our email exchange that I think is worth sharing with the audience, and they can take a look themselves to see what they think, because when Musk talks about this, Tony, he's almost hesitant and uncomfortable. Maybe that's the right word to use. And you kind of came up with a theory for that one.
Yeah, I really feel sorry for Elon. I think he's genuinely a good guy. I really do. I think that he has been boxed in. I think they took a guy who's brilliant. He has a photographic memory. He's done very well with his business models. People can say what they want about his business models. He's been successful, and now he's been put on a pedestal all around the world, meeting with heads of state, meeting with governors last week. And they're all turning to him like, well, what do you think? What's your opinion? And it always comes to AI, these interviews. And the poor guy, it's like he's sitting on nails. I really don't think he wants to be in this position, but he is trapped. And I really feel sorry. Elon, we would like to invite you on the show as a friend of the Kev Baker and Anthony Pat shows. Okay? Johnny Whistles, what do you got to say about that? Do you think we should have continued to invite Elon Musk onto the show?
As long as it doesn't mention the neural lace, it's fine.
And you know, Johnny, I'm glad you brought that up, because Dark in the chat room says Elon will have a neural net that keeps it friendly. And you know, this neural lace, it could well be that he's trying to hype up the fear, Johnny, so that people will rush towards his neural lace when it comes out, because they'll see that as the last bastion of hope, the one thing that will stop the AI from going rogue. And people will roll up their sleeves, or however they're going to put it into us. And it could well be just a marketing ploy, man. Hype the fear, roll out the solution.
Well, Kev, I'm quite able to open doors and put the kettle on and flick switches myself and use my credit card. I don't need any chips or any neural lace. You can keep them for all the nutters.
Exactly. However, this is the world we're moving into. And I've still seen people out there, they're saying, well, how does AI ever going to affect me? None of this is relevant. It really is. And whether you appreciate it or not, like I was saying at the start, from transport to healthcare to banking to every aspect of your lives, AI is already playing a major role. And how could you tell the difference between me and my AI avatar if somebody made it up? You know, that ship sailed a long time ago as well, because right now people don't know the difference between speaking to a human and speaking to a bot We kind of proved that when we opened the show with people being comforted by an AI bot of their dead relatives, their dead friends. They honestly think they're speaking to a real person, only it's not. And Tony, that kind of thing, that kind of who you're speaking to, that's more of what we're going to go into on Friday night, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to take the Alan Turing test of whether or not you're speaking to or playing a chess game with a computer on the other side of the wall. We're going to take that. We're going to take Alan Turing's own article called The Imitation Game. And there was a movie, as people will recall, that was entitled The Imitation Game, but it had nothing to do with AI. They focused on the Enigma machine, the coding machine, a mechanical set of wheels and dials that the Germans were using for cryptology, their cryptographic communications. And Turing built a computer to break that. Now, the point here that we're getting at is that Alan Turing actually has always been talking about AI way back in the 40s. So we're going to present that as the Turing test of AI and these bots, testing whether or not they're actually talking to the dead. We'll get into that on Friday.
Absolutely, folks. And guess what? We are almost out of time already. But just think about this. When we go over this Turing paper on Friday, we like to say we keep you ahead of the curve of all this information. And I can tell you right now that the youngsters and the people who are going through university learning about all this stuff, so they go on to make the AI, none of them have read the paper by Alan Turing. None of them. So you're going to be ahead of all of them on Friday night. Join us for that. Join us tomorrow. Phil Bean on ABS with his spiritual sword. Love that guy. Wherever you are, make it TFR.
And didn't touch that dial.
God bless you all.
This is the Kev Baker Show. Seeking answers to age-old questions, deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're back. This is the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, and you can find us at tfrlive.com. I'm your host, Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you from Glasgow, Scotland. But it's not just me on this show. Obviously, I've got my team behind me as well. And I've got Johnny Whistles. He's here with us tonight. And being Wednesday night, we're joined by our good friend, our fellow co-host, Mr. Anthony Patch is here as well. I hope you're all ready for another info-filled hour of radio right here on KBS. And to do that, Anthony Patch has got to be one of the best characters around that we can bring on board to help us prepare for this AI revolution that is almost upon us. I really am so proud of these shows that we are doing because
I say back, do you realize what you just said? And you're like, wait a second. No, I just reported what I found in this article. What does it mean? And that's how we play off of each other. I put it into context for you. And what this whole quantum chip is the chip. They're talking about using checks that have a quantum bit embedded in them. And that chip is quantum entangled with a master bit, quantum bit, that the bank holds as the identifier. Now, that's the basic scenario. The context of that is quantum entanglement of particles that each individual person has as a identifier, a quantum particle identifier. And what I related to you is that is exactly how they will pull off the mark of the beast. That is how they embed quantum particles in the nanoparticle scenario of the third strand of DNA that we've talked about for 3 years now. that literally they are talking about quantum entanglement of DNA as the mark of the beast system. And right now they're dormant, but they will be activated by the 5G system that we're fully immersed in. But again, the finer point to this is they're giving you a clue in a scenario based upon
talking about later. I get New Scientist magazine, and a story in there this week caught my attention because the headline reads, "Quantum bank checks may be forgery proof." They had me at quantum, you know that. And what they're talking about here is a theoretical scenario where basically we're going to be entangling qubits in the future so that cash transactions are going to be absolutely safe and secure. Nobody will be able to hack into them. Now, in the article, it talks about Alice and Bob and the bank giving out qubits and entangling them, and even admits that in practical terms, this isn't going to fly. However, when you factor in all the stuff that we've been privileged to learn from Anthony over the years, perhaps there's another aspect to this story, because maybe it's not going to take us taking qubits off the bank that are quantumly entangled so they're hack-proof, stuff like that. But what if we have a chip, a quantum bit, if you like, within us ourselves? And we'll get to more of that later on. But when I hit you with that earlier on, Tony, it was like a eureka moment. You almost flew off the chair.
Yeah, it really did, because we joke around off the air about the things that you say to me, you report to me, and I
look at a lot of the AI stuff out there. I listen to a lot of the other podcasts, and, it might sound like we're blowing our own trumpets, but we really are taking you all to beyond the curve. That is how far ahead of the game we are with some of the information that we break down on the show. And tonight is going to be no different. It certainly isn't, because we're going to be talking about death bots and quantum networks. But before we get there, let's bring in Johnny Whistles. How you doing, man?
Doing well, Kev. Thanks very much. Yeah, looking forward to this, because some of the things we're going to go into at the start, Kev, is probably the creepiest thing that I've ever heard. So looking forward to and to hear Mr. Patch again, obviously.
Before we go to Tony, the only one regret I've got about this whole radio gig, Johnny, is, right, we come across so many interesting characters, and just some of the conversation and the fun that we were having just before we came to air tonight. My biggest regret is the fact that we're separated by an ocean from people like Tony, most of our audience as well, because, John, what a laugh we've just had, right?
Honestly, you couldn't believe that. I mean, just before the show, and we're almost falling off our chairs here, Kev. That was something to behold. I wish the people could actually have heard it.
Yeah, it really is. And something else I'm proud of, we've always got new listeners jumping on board. So just quickly, if you haven't heard of Anthony Patch before, he's an author, researcher, speaker. He shot to prominence with his coverage, his knowledge of all things related to the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, over at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland. He's an author of a number of books: Covert Catastrophe, 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Revising Reality, and most recently he has started putting together something called Entangled. Now, this is the e-magazine version of all the kind of stuff you hear on the show, and so much more, because we've got guest writers, we've got some of the audience, they chip in, we've got music, we've got video, there's everything in there, and it's exactly what you need to prepare yourself for the times that lie ahead. So, Tony, welcome to the show. Have you got over all that laughter we were doing before the show?
I wish we had recorded it, my friend. That was some priceless stuff, and we were all over the spectrum.
Absolutely. And before we get going tonight, myself and Johnny and Tony, we often talk about the emails that get sent between myself and Tony and stuff like that, and this quantum entanglement that we have. And sometimes, most of the time, I don't even appreciate some of the stuff that I stumble across. And just a quick one to start us off tonight, and this does lead into the quantum networks that we're going to be